Greetings and welcome to the Gaming Codex, the show where I try to explain to you all the many terms used within video games and the video games industry. And today's term is procedural generation. And the, general definition of this would be in computing that procedural generation is a method of creating data algorithmically as opposed to manually. In computer graphics, it's also called random generation and is commonly used to create textures and 3D models. In video games, it is used to automatically create large amounts of content in a game. Advantages of procedural generation include smaller file sizes, larger amount of content, and randomness for less predictable gameplay. So what does this actually mean? Well, instead of you going and making a map, like painting each and every bit of it, putting here a wall, putting here a hill, making here a valley, planting here a tree, you can create an algorithm that does that for you. But when you make this algorithm, you just can't say include diostream.h void main int map equals rand parentheses. That's not how it works. Don't try to compile that, your PC will explode. Procedural generation is based on the idea that you have made an algorithm with certain rules in it. You have told that algorithm what it can actually make out of that map. You have told it what a tree is. You have told it where to put a tree. You have told it, hey, if there's a house there, don't put a tree in it. You define rules, guidelines. You define what this algorithm has to know in order to actually be able to build a map. And every map it creates will be bound to that algorithm. So if you didn't think of something specific, like you didn't think of a way to program into the algorithm that, hey, let's make a cave that leads to a waterfall, and under that waterfall there's an even bigger cave with treasure in it and a monster, and a shaft that leads all the way back up to the side of a hill where the tree with a house in it is. If you didn't tell it that, it's not gonna make that. It's not gonna make something truly interesting. It's gonna make a lot of stuff, absolutely. It's gonna make stuff that you would not have the time to do. But unless you made a really kick-ass algorithm, all the stuff is gonna look the same-ish, and it's gonna be bland and boring. Well, that is in terms of creating maps with procedural generation. You do have examples of games that avoid this. For example, Minecraft. Minecraft can create some really very nice vistas with procedural generation because, well, Notch and Mojang and everybody that's been working on it has spent quite a long time just making a really good terrain generation system. But does absolutely get boring after a while, and in many ways does not compete with what you would see in a game that, well, for one, has graphics, and two, is manually made by someone with the eye of an artist that can actually go in and finally detail things. As the definition said, you would have also seen procedural generation being used to create graphics like textures and 3D models, but that's not actually that often used in games. And it kind of boggles the mind because this is a technique that's been used in the demo scene for over a decade. I remember demos that looked just absolutely amazing in terms of graphics quality that were a few kilobytes in size. Sure, it may have required some compute power, and I'm not particularly sure about how you would go about creating usable, reusable even data using procedurally generated elements that you do not have direct control over, you just algorithmically create them. So maybe that's why they're not being used all that often, but still, it's a possibility. It's something you can do. Now, what would be the popular definition of procedural generation? Well, that would be that everything is randomly made by a computer, giving infinite possibility and diversity. No, as I've said it before, it's all limited to how good the algorithm is. It won't be random. It'll be based on what a designer believed was sufficient for the game, and it will in no way be infinitely diverse or offer infinite possibilities, because again, you are very limited to what the algorithm believes it can do. I use the example of maps because this was the main application of procedural generation in video games for quite a long time. I mean, Diablo is procedurally generated in its levels. They're all made using chunks that an algorithm is told to put side by side in certain configurations. You've got Rogue and literally every roguelike doing the exact same thing for the past, 40 years almost? You have games like the Elite series that have been using this for over 30 years, which makes sense because most of those games, all of them, had hundreds of millions, billions of planets you could visit, and stars and systems. That's not something you can do by hand. It's only something you can do through procedural generation, which is why Elite Dangerous gets boring. And it's why No Man's Sky was also very boring, because every planet was basically the same, but with a different color. There was nothing to actually do there. There is no magic way through which procedural generation can give you a more diverse, better gaming experience if the core of it, the bit that's not made procedurally, isn't already good. You also had Borderlands that featured a bajillion weapons. Most of them were the same. They looked a tiny bit different, but for the most part they were the same and kinda boring, though I did have a revolver that shot missiles, so that was something. It's not really all that great, is what I'm saying. It can have absolutely its benefits. Like I said, Elite Dangerous would not have been possible without this kind of method of programming a video game. Could have not made a space so big, so vast, so empty, but then that you can fill up with manually created content later on, that you would also put in an algorithm to, spread about in the galaxy, not go through each and every source system and place them there manually, because again it will take you a billion years, even more. It's not a substitute for actual proper manual design. You don't get the same sense of there being a personal touch there, of something being created with a purpose in mind, with a flow in mind, again, unless it was made by a really, really good algorithm. I mean, the kind we don't have now, but we may one day soon. Now, what is the marketing definition of procedural generation? Well, that would be unlimited content, aka endless trash. Because of games like Spore and No Man's Sky more recently, procedural generation has become a bit of a faux pas, a no-no, a sign that, yep, the developer just decided to go completely lazy and not actually make proper levels or proper content, just made an algorithm that spit out a bunch of trash and call it a day. Because you do see quite a lot of trash games using procedural generation on account of it's easy to make something very big, something vast, with not as much effort or quality. You also kind of get the sense that, at some point, Ubisoft will probably be able to replace all those Romanians with just an algorithm, so then there'd be no one to call you a Call of Duty fanboy because you said that The Division was kind of boring. Also, the algorithm will probably make levels that I was gonna say are not as good, but I have played a lot of Ubisoft games, open world ones, where, they weren't as good. But they can be good. And I mean, the procedurally generated ones can be good because we are now at the cusp of something new, something called machine learning. It's being used through all sorts of different ways to learn to play Go, learn to play chess, learn to play Hearthstone, learn to play StarCraft 2. It's being used to teach a machine something, and then that machine can do that thing faster than a human can. It can probably do it better because the machine will try to understand things we take for granted, things we put down to instinct, but it's actually something that we do with our brains without knowing it. So yeah, it's instinct. Our subconscious is instinct. That gut feeling, that comes from your head actually. So don't trust your gut because it's your head. And I mean, don't trust your head because it's your gut. You get the idea. If you could teach an AI what an actual good FPS game level is, if you could teach it by feeding it levels from Doom, from Duke Nukem 3D, from Quake, and if it could understand, then it would be not all that inconceivable that an algorithm built like this would be capable of creating levels, well, on the level of Levelord. But that's probably not something that a game developer will invest into, on account of they would need gigantic severance packages to fire those thousands of people. And in the end, honestly, would anybody be able to tell the difference if the AI was really all that capable? You just replace one version of endless trash with a very, very accurate facsimile of the same endless trash. Though maybe they'll put a bit more effort. I mean, the AIs will maybe put a bit more effort into creating procedurally generated video games. Not that I'm saying that all procedural generation is bad. When it is used right, like in Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 and Elite, it's brilliant. Well, Elite has limitations, but still, it can create marvelous things, or just be absolutely lazy. But then again, even things done manually can be absolutely lazy, even though they require quite a lot of work, Again, going back to the Ubisoft game, the game. That would be it for this edition of the Gaming Codex. Come back next time when we will talk about a brand new term. Goodbye.